I'm a girl. My mom was a horrible addict who barely took care of me when I was a kid. At the time of this incident, I was around 6 or 7 years old, so my understanding of what was happening may not have made much sense. This took place in the 90s. One night, my mother and I were on a car ride. I wasn't sure why we were driving or where we were going, but it was late. I don't know the exact time, but it must have been really late because there weren't many cars on the street. I was half asleep in the back seat and don't even remember getting into the car. My mom eventually pulled up to some sketchy-looking house and left me in the car. It felt like she was gone forever. Then out of nowhere, the car door swung open and someone violently grabbed me by the arm and yanked me out. I started screaming and crying until the man who grabbed me looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Be quiet and don't try to run or I'll kill you." He had a scruffy beard and looked completely unhinged. I was terrified, so I did what he said. He held me tightly by the arm, slammed the car door shut, and started walking me down the street. I kept looking back at the house my mom had gone into, hoping she'd come out at the last second and save me. I stared at it for as long as I could as the man dragged me farther and farther away. As we walked, I wanted to cry, but I was too scared and in shock. Every time I sniffled or made a sound, he would squeeze my arm tighter and yell at me. I can't even describe how terrified and confused I was. We walked for a while until we reached the projects, a cluster of cramped buildings in a run-down neighborhood. He led me into one of them and up a flight of stairs. My legs and feet ached horribly, but I didn't dare stop or complain. When we reached the next floor, I noticed a random guy smoking a cigarette in the stairwell. Then, without warning, the guy who had kidnapped me suddenly fell to the ground. It happened so fast, I didn't even understand what was going on. The next thing I knew, the man who'd been smoking the cigarette was punching and kicking my kidnapper in the head and face. The kidnapper was out cold. The cigarette guy grabbed him by the back of his jacket and threw him down the stairs. You have no idea how terrifying it is to see an unconscious man tumble down a flight of stairs. There was blood everywhere. I still have no idea how the cigarette guy knew to help me, but I'm so glad he did. Maybe he saw the tears in my eyes, or maybe he just sensed something was wrong and got a bad feeling. But the moment he realized what was happening, he acted instantly. The very first chance he got, he attacked my would-be kidnapper. Afterward, the cigarette guy started pacing back and forth, swearing under his breath, gritting his teeth and clenching his fists. I thought he was angry at me, so I started to cry. He looked at me and said, Okay, shut up. He sounded frustrated, and I listened out of fear. I wasn't as terrified of him as I was of the bearded man, but I was still scared. He started asking me questions with a harsh tone. Why are you out this late? Where are your parents? Why would you talk to strangers? I was in such shock and confusion that I couldn't even answer him properly. He asked if I knew my way home, and I told him I didn't. I tried to explain what happened, giving him a broken, jumbled story. Somehow, with the little information I gave, he figured out where my mom's car was. The only thing I clearly remember about the road was a house with Christmas lights still up, even though Christmas was already over. I think he must have known the area well and pieced it together from that detail, though I don't even remember mentioning the lights. Anyway, he told me he would take me back if I promised over and over that I wouldn't tell the police or anyone who looked like him about what happened. He made me swear I wouldn't say anything at all. He still sounded angry, but at that point I didn't care what he asked. I just wanted to get back to my mom. So I agreed. I followed him down the stairs. The bearded guy was still lying on the ground, bleeding at the bottom of the stairs where the cigarette guy had thrown him. He wasn't moving at all then. For all I knew, he was dead, and honestly, I hoped he was. Cigarette guy stepped over the bearded man, and I followed. When we got outside, he looked around frantically, clearly panicked. I remember him saying, "The police don't like me." We walked out of the projects, and my feet still hurt. Cigarette guy was walking fast, almost running, and I had to jog just to keep up with him. I started crying, and he asked what was wrong. I told him my feet hurt, and I remember him sucking his teeth before picking me up with an attitude. He awkwardly cradled me in both arms and kept walking down the road. Then I remember him swearing suddenly and running behind a house. A police car was driving down the road, and he quickly set me down and told me to run to it. I tried, but my legs could barely move, and I was terrified. The cop car kept driving and passed right by without seeing me before I could even get close. He cursed under his breath again, picked me up, and started running down the street. He carried me behind several houses. hiding every time a police car drove by. I realize now that the police were probably looking for me. He was running fast, holding me tightly in both arms when I saw my mom in the distance standing by her car, surrounded by police. Cigarette guy stopped, set me down, and told me to run to them. I was so excited that the pain in my legs disappeared. I ran straight toward my mom, and when I looked back, he was gone. I ran toward the police and my mom. She picked me up and hugged me tightly. The police started asking both of us questions. I don't remember much about what they asked, but I do remember my mom telling them some convoluted story that didn't make any sense. She basically told me not to say anything, so I stayed quiet and just cried a lot. We eventually went home. A few days later, my dad picked me up and he could tell something was wrong. I told him everything. After that, I never lived with my mom again. When I grew up and had time to think about that day, I never forgave my mother. Not too long ago, I asked my dad what he remembered about the situation, and he told me what he thought happened based on what I had explained to him years ago. He said my mom was on a drug binge and that I'd been kidnapped. Someone saved me, but the person who did had warrants. He wasn't mad at me. He was just frustrated with the situation he suddenly found himself in. Imagine being a criminal on the run, and now you have a kidnapped girl with you after beating a man half to death. If he'd been caught with me, he could have gone to jail for kidnapping. With my mom lying and me being in shock and confused, I wouldn't have been able to tell the police that he was actually helping me. Because while it was all happening, I didn't even realize he was. This happened about a month ago, and it was a bizarre experience to say the least. I'm 15 and I was playing some video games before passing out. It was around 11 p.m. when I suddenly heard the doorbell ring. Out of instinct, I started walking downstairs, but about halfway there, rationality kicked in. Who the fuck rings a doorbell at 11 p.m.? I silently walked back upstairs and stood in the hallway, kind of expecting something bad to happen. Exactly a minute later, the doorbell rang twice. My parents came out of their room and gave me a puzzled look, and all I could do was shrug. Then he started banging on the door. My mother jumped at the first bang and my father's eyes widened, more in confusion than fear. He decided to go downstairs and look through the peephole. It was our neighbor. My dad hesitantly opened the door and I could hear his voice tremble slightly. "Hey, what do you need?" The next thing I heard was a full-blown screaming argument from our neighbor, claiming that this house was his and that we'd stolen it from him. My dad's uneasiness quickly turned into annoyance, and he simply shut the door without giving our neighbor the time of day. My dad had just stepped onto the first stair when our neighbor slammed into the door. I'm not talking about banging with a fist, this man was full-on body slamming it. My father froze for a second, and then the neighbor charged the door again. This time we heard the wood start to splinter. Everyone reacted at once. My dad rushed to brace the door with his body. My mom went to get the other two kids, and I grabbed the phone to call 911. The body slamming went on for another 5 minutes, and while I was on the phone with 911, it suddenly stopped. I thought it was over and felt a wave of relief, but I stayed on the line just in case. I went to peek out the front window, and boy, it was only getting started. Our neighbor got into his Jeep Wrangler and pointed it straight at our house. We had no idea what he was doing until he hit the gas and the tires screeched. Then he slammed on the brakes. He was trying to scare us out of the house. I was still on the phone with 911 when I stepped away from the window to comfort my siblings, cracking jokes and trying to lighten the mood. Eventually, the police arrived and arrested him. The next morning, I left for school, still shaken from the night before. When I stepped onto our front steps, I saw tire marks leading right up to our front door. The lunatic had actually tried to ram our door down with his car. I really never want to see that guy ever again, but he lives directly to my right. Fuck my life. This just happened a few days ago, and I'm still extremely shaken up. Some backstory. I live on the second floor of a 3-level apartment building. We have a crawl space that connects all the apartments. None of us really know why it's there, but we all store stuff in it. Since no one ever goes inside, we always felt pretty safe. The other night, the sun was setting. It wasn't completely dark yet. I was walking through my living room when I saw a short woman on my fire escape. looking into my windows. It was extremely bizarre, considering it was still light out and she had to climb up to my fire escape somehow. There are 2 windows that the fire escape reaches, and she was peeking into both, but she didn't see me. My heart was racing as I crawled onto the floor and watched her try to open the windows. I didn't know what the hell to do because my phone was in the other room. After what felt like an eternity, she finally left. I ran to my room to grab my phone so I could text my landlord and call the cops. When I came back into the living room and looked out the windows to see if I could spot her, I suddenly heard a strange noise coming from the ceiling. We have one of those tile ceilings made out of separate slabs of cork or wood. I looked up and saw one of the slabs lifted with 2 eyes staring down at me. I had no idea how she got into the crawl space so quickly, but I grabbed the nearest thing next to me, a broom, and started hitting her through the ceiling while calling the cops as soon as she crawled away. They showed up and searched the place but didn't find her until a few days later, when she was on someone else's fire escape. The cops said she was definitely on some hard drugs and had been violent toward them. For 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was set to move back to Ireland, my friend and I were at my apartment having dinner and a few drinks. I was renting a place in the city, and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I was 20 at the time. That night, my roommate left to have dinner with some friends. About a minute after she left, someone buzzed our door to be let into the building. I looked at the camera and didn't recognize the woman. She looked to be in her late 20s to early 30s, so I assumed she was one of my roommate's friends coming to meet her or something like that. At first, I didn't buzz her in since I didn't know her, and she walked away from the door. But then I hit the buzzer right after she walked off, figuring she might come back, and then I walked away from the camera, meaning I couldn't see if she actually entered. I assumed that if she didn't, she'd just call or text my roommate. Boy, was I wrong. This woman came up to my apartment on the 6th floor just 2 minutes after my roommate had left. That meant she must have taken the lift and they must have seen each other when my roommate got out and the woman got in. Realizing how strange that was, I didn't open the door when she rang it. Instead, I looked through the peephole just to confirm it wasn't someone I knew. I backed away from the door and gestured for my friend to stay silent. We crept back to my room at the far side of the apartment, and I started calling my roommate, who wasn't picking up. Meanwhile, the woman kept ringing the doorbell nonstop. My friend kept telling me to just open the door. In her mind, it's a woman, so she must be harmless. I told her she was being an idiot for underestimating the female sex. Women can be dangerous too. She kept insisting, and I kept refusing. The bell kept ringing. I kept checking through the peephole. At this point, it was obvious that if the woman really knew my roommate, she would have called or texted her. But she didn't take out her phone at all. She just stood there, eerily silent. She didn't call out any names, didn't ask if anyone was home. It was unsettling. I finally got through to my roommate, who said she wasn't expecting anyone and didn't know anyone that age. She asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just freaked out. By now it had been at least 20 minutes. The woman clearly knew someone was home, the lights were on, and I figured that's why she wasn't leaving. I kept watching her through the peephole. At one point, she walked into the lift for a minute, then came back out. The thing is, the lift in our building is really loud and I didn't hear it move. That meant someone was in there waiting for her. That realization made my stomach drop. After about 40 minutes, she finally left. I ran to the hallway and checked the building's outside camera. The woman left with 2 men, all of them carrying backpacks. I'll be eternally grateful that I trusted my instincts and didn't listen to my friend. Sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. This happened back in 2013 when I was 17. My family was looking at this house and the owner showed up to talk with my parents. He seemed like a nice older man, said he'd built the house himself. It was a pretty 2-story place overlooking a river. I stood back while everyone talked, just kind of observing. While the owner was chatting and laughing with my parents, there was a brief pause in the conversation. He turned away from them, and in that instant, his expression completely changed. From friendly and smiling to the most sinister, hateful scowl I've ever seen. I don't think he realized I was watching. My head was down, so he probably thought I was on my phone. But when he turned back toward my parents, the smile instantly returned. It made my stomach turn. I told my mom about it later and she said it was weird, but probably nothing. Maybe he was just socially awkward. So we bought the house. A week after moving in, my family went to church one Sunday morning, but I decided to stay home. Around 11 a.m., I heard loud banging outside. It was rhythmic, coming from the side of the house. I was upstairs on the opposite side and figured maybe it was just the wind. It was stormy that day. The banging stopped after about 5 minutes, and I didn't think much of it. About 10 minutes later, I started hearing footsteps downstairs. Then chairs moving, cabinet doors opening, the refrigerator door too. I froze. Then I quietly locked my bedroom door, grabbed my baseball bat, and called 911. While giving them my address, I texted my mom to tell her someone was in the house and that I'd already called the police. The 911 operator told me officers were about 10 minutes away. As she said that, I heard slow, deliberate footsteps heading toward the stairs. The house was thin-walled enough that I could track exactly where he was. My mom texted back that she was on her way, but she was 30 minutes out. So there I was, a 17-year-old girl, 5'2" and maybe 100 pounds, sitting in my locked room, holding a baseball bat, knowing full well that if this man came in, I wouldn't stand a chance. I was absolutely terrified. The footsteps reached the hallway. I heard him walk right up to my door. The handle turned and stopped. It was locked. Then there was silence. I could hear him breathing on the other side. He stood there for what felt like forever, though it was probably 10 seconds. Then he turned around and walked back downstairs. I heard the back door open and shut. 3 minutes later, the police arrived. The 911 operator asked if I could safely open the door or if they needed to force it. I told her he was gone, so I let them in. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken locks, nothing. When my mom arrived, she looked at my stepdad and asked if he had changed the locks after we moved in. He hadn't. The creepiest part, the thing that proved I hadn't imagined it, was the hallway carpet. My mom had vacuumed that morning, and there were clear shoe prints leading down the hall larger than anyone in our family's feet. The police hadn't gone upstairs yet. The prints stopped just outside my bedroom door. The old owner, the man who built the house, had died about a year later. Please don't forget to change your locks. Last night, my friends, my crush and I agreed to meet at my favorite bar after work. I got off about 30 minutes early, so I arrived first and ordered myself a beer. There was this huge, muscular guy with a long ponytail sitting at the bar, and the seat next to him was empty. He offered me the seat, so I sat down. We made small talk, and he seemed nice enough at first. He kept asking why I was alone and saying I looked nervous and should relax. It was a bit weird, but since he had an almost empty bottle of vodka in front of him, I didn't think much of it. My friends finally arrived just as I finished my first beer, and we moved to a table together. I had 3 more beers, and we were having a great time. But every time I went to the bathroom, that same guy was there asking if I was okay. It was strange, but I brushed it off. I only felt a little tipsy, and everything seemed fine. After a while, I started feeling sick, so I went outside for some air and a cigarette. The guy followed me out and asked again if I was okay. That's when I started getting really uncomfortable. The bar was packed, but it felt like he had been watching me the entire night. I went back inside, ordered a glass of water, and told my friends I wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home. They all offered to walk me, which I'm so grateful for now. I took a sip of the water and suddenly it all hit me. I ran outside and started throwing up. My legs gave out, so I sat down on a staircase, still getting sick. My friends found me a few minutes later, arguing about whether to get me a taxi or carry me home. Then that guy showed up again. He kept insisting that he lived just down the street and that I could crash on his couch. My coworker, who's basically like an older brother to me, got pissed and told the guy to fuck off. They somehow managed to get me on my feet, though I could barely stand, and dragged me to my friend's place. I spent the night hugging a bucket, feeling like I was going to die. This morning, I couldn't even stand up for hours. When I finally did, I threw up again immediately. Around 1 p.m., I managed to get to the train station, grab something to eat and drink, and head home. I'm still shaking, sweating, and everything looks blurry.